Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane Grunewald, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. Today, Dane is joined by Steve Cadigan. Steve is a top talent strategist and leadership expert with over 30 years of experience. He famously led LinkedIn's early hypergrowth phase as its first CHRO, building its world-class company culture from scratch and scaling the organization from 400 to 4,000 employees in 3.5 years. As one of the most provocative global thought leaders on the future of work, Steve is hired not only by Fortune 500 companies, but by entire countries to help them navigate the talent landscape. In this conversation, they'll explore how traditional career paths are breaking down, why surfacing hidden talent has always been a challenge, and how AI might offer new ways to recognize and develop potential. Steve also shares how working across different projects, teams, and environments fuels the energy people bring to their work. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name is Dane Grunewald, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group. And today I'm joined here in California, but not locally, by Steve Cadigan, sitting in a basement, which is unusual for people in California. So I'm very jealous of Steve and his basement. But Steve has a great story. First, Chief HR Officer of LinkedIn, a future of work thought leader, and the author of Workquake. So it's going to be a fun conversation, and welcome, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me, Dane.
You bet. So tell us a bit more about how you came to be living this life that you're living, making the impact that you are.
Well, I can assure the listeners it was not a result of having any kind of plan. I am someone who grew up in South Africa. We're Americans. I was born in America, but my parents were real wanderers and explorers. And for the first 6 years of my life were in South Africa. We were asked to leave, and not very politely, by the South African government when I was 7, and so had to go back to the U.S., raised in the countryside of Connecticut, which is wonderful. My dad was an educator and an Episcopal minister, and so he became headmaster of a private school, and I had this school as my playground, which was awesome as a kid. I went to school there, went to university with no plan. I didn't know what I wanted to be, where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. And I was in a family where business was kind of the bad path, right? It was more community, helping, educating, being an artist, being a writer, being a creative. And so I majored in history because it was the only subject that I liked. And I avoided everything, accounting, econ, business. It was like, no. But the more I went through college, the more my friendship circle included people who were on that path, and I became curious. So by senior year, I had less of an idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I showed up just reluctantly, but at the encouragement of some friends, to some on-campus interviews, and this couple of companies from San Francisco interviewed me and said, hey, if you come out here, we'll talk to you more. One of them happened to be a women's apparel company called Esprit. And they offered me, after a few rounds of interviews, an opportunity to go through some rotations and try out the world of work. And what really appealed to me was the outdoor orientation of that company. It was really, Esprit was really living the Esprit de vie, which was just, classes of mountain climbing, learning windsurfing, scuba diving, living the California lifestyle. And I thought, this is great. And they were one of the few companies at the time that had a fitness center and a cafe on site. So way ahead of the curve. We're talking like mid 1980s.
Yeah.
And so my second rotation there, I wound up in this role as a recruiter, and I immediately fell in love with the world of talent and human resources. And I was like, you're going to pay me to meet people and assess whether they're a good fit for the team? This is the greatest deal ever. And so I realized very quickly, Dane, that one of my joys in life is competing in sports. And not only that, is watching people compete and how they handle things. That hobby of mine was something that suited me really well in the world of human resources, which is just trying to figure out what combination of people and environments and coaches and leaders is going to produce the best outcome. And in college, I played 3 sports. So in high school, I played 4 sports. So this is my life. And my dad was a coach too. So it's like in our blood. And I just, over the next 20 years, I worked progressively in different talent roles in different companies, different industries, and went from fashion to insurance to semiconductor to networking equipment to an opportunity where I lived and worked in Singapore. I was the chief HR leader for Cisco Asia for a period of time. Then I went to Canada for 2 years, and I was in the first head of HR role of my career. I never wanted to be a head of HR because I'd never met a head of HR that I really wanted to be like, and so I had to get talked into that. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. That was a company called PMC Sierra. They don't exist anymore. They were acquired, but that was such a great experience becoming a head of HR because you're at the table making really big decisions that impact lives.
Yeah.
And it's a rush, man. And after being there, it's hard not to be at the table.
Yeah.
One of the first things we had to consider when I was in that role was this is like 2004. It's post-dot-com bubble burst. What we had to figure out was like, hey, we're going to need to cut like $12 million from our budget. And how are we going to do that? We're going to let people go? Are we going to, close down a product line? Are we going to try to sell a piece of the business?
Yep.
And working with the finance team, we figured out that if we forced people to take a vacation during the Christmas holidays and Canada Day, which is also around the 4th of July for the U.S., if we closed the offices for 10 days, 5 in each period, that would save us $1 million a day and we would meet our number. And so that was just so and this is sort of my DNA is let's try to find everything we can to not have to let people go. And that level of creativity was really inspiring to me. So roll the tape forward. The CEO in Canada decides to retire. And all of a sudden I realize I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, and there's like 2 other jobs in the whole city that would be interesting to me. And I'm stuck in a lifestyle city, not a career city. And that was terrifying for me. And, I remember this from my days in Asia when a lot of our Australian superstars had to leave Australia because there's a finite amount of career opportunities there, right? And I think as Americans, a lot of Americans don't realize, like, most countries are not like this. Like, you can stay in your own country and ride an amazing career. And I was also asking these Australians, like, why are all you guys in Singapore? And like, well, we don't pay taxes in Australia if we work in Singapore, and the tax rate is less here. So we're getting a 7% pay increase just moving from Singapore to Australia, from Australia. So that was just a real interesting learning exercise, for me in that whole journey. Anyway, so my CEO, he retires in Canada, and I find myself in a lifestyle city. I love snowboarding, so I love Vancouver, just the happiest place I've ever lived for me personally and professionally. And then I got wooed by the video game company Electronic Arts to come back to expensive land, California. And so I took that opportunity, and then the 2008 market collapse of the second mortgage crisis hit, and my job basically disappeared. And they weren't going to let me go, but it was super uninteresting. And that's when LinkedIn came and knocked at the door and said, "Would you be our first chief HR officer?" And that was just an opportunity of a lifetime.
Oh, how cool.
I couldn't refuse it. Absolutely couldn't refuse it. So I didn't know if I was prepared for a startup. I thought, how hard can it be? I've made so many mistakes and seen so many mistakes in big companies. How hard could this be? Turns out incredibly hard. If you've never built a company, and you walk in and they've got no policy, no practice, no talent strategy, no thinking around performance management, org design, layers, promotions, comp strategy, and you've got to build it from nothing. Yeah. That's really hard because what you wind up doing is negotiating with every executive who's got their own perspective on how it should all work. Yeah. But it's very motivating because you get to build something. So, and that's something I will say to the audience, right off the gate, which I think we should all be forced to be in the position that I somehow crazily decided to do, which is take your craft, go somewhere and take it down to the studs and build it from nothing. Yeah. You will learn so much because the big company journey, if you think about it, is you're just tuning what people made before you. You're kind of making it a little bit better and tweaking it, but you're not constructing it from nothing. And when you have to do that, that's really like a crash course of education on steroids. Yeah. And that was so helpful to me. Like, if we're going to build a performance management like what should it look like, and why are we doing that? Like, why do we even need performance reviews? Like, what's the ultimate outcome?
Yeah.
And that was so great. And to be surrounded by a leadership team that was really open to wanting to build, something great. We didn't know what it should look like, but we did know we wanted to build a world-class company was really great. So anyway, just to finish the story, I was there for 4 years, which is LinkedIn from 400 to 4,000, from 2 countries to 17, from 2 offices to 26.
Yep.
How I still have a head of hair is a mystery to me.
I'm jealous.
That was the most amazing journey, more stressed out than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
You're home, but you're not home. You're worried about that. Oh, I got to get that presentation to the board of directors. Some superstar just, rejected our offer or quit. So that was really crazy. And that was, so about 12 years ago, I decided to leave and just take a breath. And over the last 12 years, I started my own business, helping leaders, countries, companies, cities, and industries around the world think more creatively and thoughtfully around people strategy.
That's such a cool story. And I've taken now 2 pages of notes. So there's going to be so much to dive into. What's fascinating there, Steve, and you and I talked about it pre-show too, that kind of journey through other countries, cultures, forced change. And you talked about it, you put it in a way of saying, I like to compete and see how people compete, but I also like to see how they handle the tough stuff. And isn't that just fascinating, just seeing what people are capable of when they're put to it, whether it's joining a startup or having to move countries or dealing with the setback. It's you often can see some of the real magic kind of just float up and surface.
Yeah, 100% agree. And, that's even more helpful now in a world that feels a lot more dynamic, Dane, like things are changing a lot faster. And the more we surround ourselves with people who've been in diversity of situations, I think is an asset. And that gets to one of the biggest problems I hear from leaders today, which is, Steve, my team's just not staying here as long as they used to. And I said, well, how's business? And they go, well, business is great, but my people just aren't staying. I said, so why are you carrying that paradigm that long tenure is a necessity for you to be successful? Because you're just telling me you're having, COVID was really brutal, but you're more profitable, you gain more market share, and your team's not together as long, but maybe newness of ideas and perspectives and diversity is giving you an asset you didn't appreciate.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's super powerful, particularly with some of the later generational leaders who hold that so sacred. Like,
yes,
they do need to let go. There is an opportunity to have long-term sustained performance with letting people sort of do their traveling and wandering at the same time. It's very different.
To me, that's the core. If we look at the future of teamwork, and I hear there's a really great podcast on this topic, but if we really think about that, I spend a ton of time with my clients helping them, untangle frustrations because they have this paradigm that you just described, which is the teams that win are the teams that stay together the longest. And if I ask them, do you think in the future people are going to stay in organizations longer than today? Like, we are in a period in the United States where the median tenure has gone from 5 to 4 years in the last decade.
Yep.
And I asked them, I said, do you think in the future people will stay longer? Nobody says yes. I said, okay, so you believe that trend will continue and at best will plateau at some point.
Yeah.
And the demographic 20 to 35-year-old, the median tenure for that age group is 2.5 years.
Yeah,
okay?
I believe it. I see it.
And in California, a software engineer stays in a company, a year and a half?
Yeah.
And that's like 10 years, So, but what we're not seeing is a degradation in creativity and innovation. We're not seeing a decline in profit.
Yep.
We're seeing a frustration because we're not used to that dynamic being one that we should be comfortable with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm trying to help people see, like, listen, maybe new people with new ideas and new ways of solving problems, maybe that's an asset. And we've built compensation. If you look at every company's compensation plan, it's all driven by length of time together.
Yeah, it is.
Right? The more 401k match, or the more, in Canada, they call it the RRSP, the more vacation you get, the more, what do they call it in Canada, in Australia, the superannuation.
Superannuation.
The longer you stay.
Long service leave. Yeah.
That's right. The longer you stay, the more stuff you get.
Yeah.
But nobody believes people are going to stay longer. So why are we putting our rewards in that kind of framework. You
Yeah,
know?
it's a misalignment of incentives in many cases.
And the problem is, honestly, and this is true for so much about work today, is we haven't built a new model that makes us comfortable,
Yeah.
that we can sustainably carry this, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the biggest narrative from a lot of the people, in addition to turnover frustration? It's nobody wants to work in an office anymore, so I say, so why is that a problem? That problem is because we don't know over time, is that going to hurt teamwork? Is it going to hurt culture?
Yeah.
We just don't know
Yeah.
because we're making the sausage right now, right? You're a salesperson, right, by trade.
Yeah.
And I try to tell organizations, you've already had a remote team the
Forever.
whole life cycle of your company. It's the sales team,
Yeah.
the most important function to drive revenue, and you've been comfortable with them doing it. So extending that to other departments, why is that a problem? It's a problem because we don't have long-term proof, how that's going to play out.
And I think that's another. We had Phil Kirshner on the show who'd worked at WeWork and was at McKinsey. He's now out, I believe, on his own. But he had a great piece of research that he shared with me, which is that to actually do fully remote, you need to be really well documented. And most of us are not very good at documenting how our businesses operate, let alone how someone should perform in their role. So we're holding ourselves to this this grading curve of like, hey, let people be free and work in different directions with very antiquated infrastructure. And that's going to be an interesting shift. I know pre-show, you and I were talking about how can AI be used not to cut costs and replace jobs, but to free people up. And I think my belief is, and I'd love to hear yours, is if AI could just track what we're doing really well and give us that feedback and help us share what works really well in teams, and we just all celebrated that, we would find some really interesting evolutions of talent and ways of working.
Yeah, there are so many applications for how AI, I think, can really complement, supplement, and enhance the joy and the possibility for achievement.
Yeah.
And I feel like the biggest barrier to that is our own myopic thinking. So, for example, I have a lot of friends who are recruiters.
Yes.
And the question that they're asking is the question we all ask, which is, how can I use AI to do what I do better, faster, quicker, more insightfully, get better outcomes? And just asking a question that way, you're already limiting yourself, which is, I'm thinking about how I do my job and how I'm going to use AI rather than, what's the goal of recruiting? Bringing new talent, skills, and experiences. I think the brighter way of asking the question of AI would be, and it's very threatening, though, to someone who's a recruiter to think like this, which is, how can I solve this problem differently, AI?
Yeah.
And so if you ask AI, I want to do recruiting better, help me do recruiting better, AI will probably ask you, well, what is recruiting? Explain to me what that is.
Yeah.
Bringing new skills, talents, and abilities. Okay. And then AI will say, can you show me all the talent, skills, and abilities in your company now? And most people go, oh, we don't really have that. And so then AI is going to go, well, then how do you know you have a recruiting problem? Sounds like you have a talent awareness problem.
Interesting.
Right? And if you have a talent awareness problem, I can help solve that. AI is going to say, I'm going to go scrape all the LinkedIn profiles and all your learning management system, and I'm going to see everything you have. And then I'm going to tell you with a high degree of confidence, this person can probably do that job, that person can probably do this job. And now your recruiting strain and challenge and friction diminishes potentially, right? And that's why I think we're really struggling with AI, because we're thinking about how we're doing this now is the right ultimate truth to how this should be done, and that's not the case, really. But for me to give that up is a threat to my compensation, my financial independence. Like, if AI is taking that away, what about me, right?
Which is fascinating. I really like that view on solving the problem differently with AI, Steve. And as a sales guy by trade, I started in recruiting, full desk. So that's how I got into my salesmanship. And it's interesting when you were sharing that story about, hey, I got a job as a recruiter. It was the best job ever. I had that same experience. I was in a car at 23 driving to people's companies to talk to them about how they could bring new talent into the business to grow. And I'm like, who's paying me to do this? This is so much fun.
I know.
But it is solving the problem differently. And when people ask me, hey, as a recruiter, like, why do you guys still exist? My stock answer is, because people are really not very good at working out what talent they want. People will often dust off an old job description off the shelf or ask one person, not ask five people what they need on the team. And so we start from often a place of misinformation. So I love the way that you reframed it. Like let's actually lift the information level before we start to do the task. And that reminds me about people who talk about last mile thinking in AI. They're like, stop thinking of AI just to fix at the task level. Look at that deeper supply chain of what is the real problem here, and that's a great way to move forward.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it really is an interesting time, this AI, because we really seem to be stuck on. Wow, here's everyone. By the way, everyone feels behind with AI, even though it showed up yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting, including me.
Yeah.
I probably spend an hour to two every morning reading about AI, just trying to understand, and I feel impossibly behind. And it's not a baked cake, right? It keeps changing every day, every week, every hour. But what I find really interesting is here we are investing all our energy in trying to reconcile this new tsunami of AI, but we haven't solved email overload yet.
Nope.
We haven't solved meetings productivity.
Yeah.
Guys, time out. What makes you think we're going to figure this AI out when we haven't figured out how to use email in a way that's productive? We're using it in the wrong way, which is making each other more behind and giving everyone that we work with impossible amounts of information to consume.
Yeah.
Like, let's take a pause. Maybe we should just focus AI, like fix this obsession we seem to have with the internet, proliferating way too much information for the human brain to consume like that. And that's blocking the capacity for our teams to realize their ultimate destiny, which is got all this crap. Like I speak at conferences for a living. Like that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I can just see in people's eyes, like, God, man, when is this thing going to be over? Because I got to get back to email. Like, when's the break? I got a quick phone call I got to make. And it's just like we're fighting for attention right now. We're fighting for that moment where all the sleep research, all the brain health is like downtime is the best time.
Yeah.
And, we look at that like, oh, that's just wasteful. We can't have downtime. And we really need a reckoning here because I think we're losing the plot.
We totally need a reckoning. I mean, as a parent, you and I were talking about family pre-show, but it's really scary looking at that disconnection. My 11-year-old daughter at the weekend wanted to have a sleepover. And my first response going back to sleep is like, I'm not going to get good sleep tonight with 4 11-year-old girls partying in my house. And my wife was like, hey, do you want her to be sitting on her phone or on a screen today or out playing with her friends? And sure enough, they came, they built a slip and slide. They were out, they took 2 of my surfing leg ropes and made a big long skipping rope and they were jumping. And I was like, this is one of the most joyous weekends I've had in a long time. Like we need to create more of that human spirit and curiosity and boredom and problem solving. That stuff's real.
So true. I love this story I'm about to share with you, how I got the LinkedIn opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Came about like this. I was made aware that my son, who was in pre-kindergarten childcare, was invited to a birthday party at a kids' amusement park.
Yeah.
And my wife says, hey, I'm busy. Can you take him to that party? And I thought, Saturday at a kids' amusement park, kids eating sugar, yelling, screaming, eating bad food. Like this is my ideal nightmare weekend, situation. So I reluctantly took my son. While on that adventure, I wound up talking to another dad who was applying for a job at LinkedIn. And I said, listen, I help all my friends negotiate offers. Like, if you need some help, I'll help you. Like, just reach out. So he did. He said, here's my offer a few days later. And I helped him navigate his offer and hopefully got him a little bit more money and a little bit more stock. And then maybe a month later, he called me and said, hey, we're looking for our first head of HR. Do you want to join? Like, you'd be perfect for this company.
Yeah.
A kid's birthday party.
Yeah.
Like where I was like reluctantly investing time happened to reveal the opportunity of a lifetime. You never know, when you're in these moments.
You don't. And that's that power of human connection that I think so many people have just lost and forgotten. Like, again, we won't stay on the recruiting theme, but everyone's talking about how bad candidate experience is right now. Oh, there's all these bots and you apply for jobs and
Yeah.
no real humans looking at your resume. And it's just like, it's the last place to look for a job. Like,
Yeah.
go down to a community event. One of my good friends, the way he transitioned his career out of the military, he started inviting people for virtual cups of coffee. He was like, hey, I'm transitioning from the military. All I want is 15 minutes. We'll just sit and have coffee, and I just want to learn from you what you're seeing, what you're excited by. And he made these human connections, and sure enough, that led him to a job.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, whether it's
Yeah.
virtually or physically, like what can be achieved if we just exercise that curiosity muscle and embrace a bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, and what I love about that story, Dane, is I did something similar when I left LinkedIn. I spent the first 6 months just reconnecting with people over my career journey that I really missed, that I had a good connection with, that I got energy from. And I just started exploring ideas.
Yeah.
I had no agenda. I just like, hey, I miss you, and I'm a loser because I was so over-focused on my work. I never kept up this relationship. Shame on me. I want to reconnect and do that. And I speak to a lot of students around the world, and what I try to let them know is, like, unfortunately for you, you will never be able to test every possible environment that you could work in that could unlock incredible, experiences for you. This is the truth is, when you are building your career, you don't know, do you work better in small teams or bigger teams? Do you work better in remote teams? Do you work better on fast-paced projects? Do you have greater energy working in a big company, in a small company, a private company, a national company, a global company, a company that's on the rise, a company that's shrinking, a company that needs to do more with less, a company that just got bought, a company that's family-owned, a company that's in fashion, insurance, dairy, cheese? Like, you don't know,
So
and you'll
many
never
pieces.
know. And so, what I try to tell people is, from your first opportunity to the next, just take an inventory of, like, what do you love about this and what don't you love? And the next time you have a chance to go somewhere else, narrow that funnel. More of the stuff you really learned about yourself that you like, and less of the stuff that you don't like, And every time you make a move, you're going to learn, oh, something I didn't think I cared about my last company, it's not here, and I really miss that. I didn't put a value on that, and now I see I should have valued that, right?
Yeah.
But there's just an infinite choice set today. And this is, I think, what a lot of younger workers struggle with, is, like, they're really worried about making the wrong choice because they can see more choices than any time in history. I can see, thanks to the transparency of the internet, more new industries, more new career paths, more ways I can apply my skills and experiences. And unfortunately, that comes with a price, which is fear of making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that for leaders, think about this. Like, man, I am so happy as a parent. My kids have so many choices of where they could go and what they can do. But as a business owner, I am not happy that my employees have
Can go
so
anywhere.
many, ways that they could find a new opportunity than any time in history. That's really hard.
It is hard, and there's so much that kind of brings to mind question-wise for me. One of them is, when you think about channeling or tracking where that love, where that energy is coming from. I've heard that from a few different people recently, and it's not a silver bullet, but to me, it's probably, going back to your point about building stuff and getting things down to simple, it's probably the best thing you can ask an individual or a team to do, because it's non-judgmental. It's like, what do you love? What gives you energy? And you're not saying, hey, how was it like to work with the accounting team or the sales team on that? It's just like, what was important for you? What created that energy? And it's very human. Like, it's like, let's reward and let's focus on the good stuff, and we'll fix the other stuff later. I just find it's fascinating that we're not having more of those conversations as parents with kids, as friends with each other, as teammates with each other. It just doesn't seem to be part of the vernacular.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a journey of self-discovery, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
I remember in high school being put through one of those career questions, like asking you questions like, do you like going shopping in a hardware store?
Yeah.
Okay. My answer was like, oh, no, because I thought the perception of me liking doing that was going to reflect poorly on me. The truth is, yeah, I love shopping in hardware stores. And so, at some point you got to recognize this is my journey. This is not my parents' journey.
No.
And a lot of us get shaped by what we think our parents are expecting us to do.
Yeah.
And that's a really, I don't think it was like till I was in my 30s, I finally said, this is my journey,
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to make their parents proud, and please their parents, but they're doing nothing but trying to give you the best possible options in life, right? It's all coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But there's a tax that comes with that, which is sometimes it blocks our capacity to think more openly around, no, this is really what I love,
Yeah.
And I've told my kids, like, you want to be the gym teacher at the local elementary school? Awesome.
Yeah.
Like, if that fires you up, like I would rather you come home every day than how I came home from many of my jobs, like a zombie, fearful, having all kinds of Sunday scaries around being behind, like being out of my depth in parts of my jobs. Like, that's not where you want to be. You want to be in a place where you feel like, okay, I'm adding value, and they feel like I'm adding value.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting something and they're getting something, and that's a good trade-off.
Value is such a key word too, Steve. My coach has been talking to me a lot lately about how as kids we're conditioned not to want things for ourselves. Don't ask for that toy, don't ask for that cookie, not now. And so we're conditioned to be like careful about what we ask for and not to be selfish. And yet sometimes you need to be able to create value for yourself. What do I love doing? What gives me energy to be able to create value for others? And it doesn't matter what career you do. You can, if you're generating value, you can find a path forwards that's going to be rewarding.
Totally.
And I think that's what we've lost. Here's a scary story. My 11-year-old, the same one who had the sleepovers, she was at school and they were like, hey, career week's coming up. So the counselor thought it would be a good idea to show them a 40-minute presentation on what it costs to live in Southern California. No word of a lie. No word of a lie. Well, here's what rent would cost if you have a 1-bedroom apartment. But if you want a 4-bedroom house like mom and dad, here it is at $7,800 a month. And by the way, if you want a car payment on a VW, here's $300 a month. But if you want this $400,000 Lamborghini, this is what it costs. Like, ridiculous. And they ended up the session having just done a huge cognitive overload on these kids and said, so we want you to think about this when you start looking at what careers you could do. And I'm like, that is the most toxic messaging I could think of delivering to an 11-year-old right now. Like, they're not ready for that. And it's not even relevant. It's not even directionally correct.
Right.
It's crazy.
I know. Yeah, that's a miss. And you're already starting someone feeling stressed out about something.
Yeah, at 11. And let's be honest, going back to that fast change that we talked about at the beginning of the show, the jobs that our counselors are talking to 11-year-olds about right now might not be there at 19 or 21. There's going to be far more interesting ways to participate in the world.
Yeah. I think what's really both exciting and inviting a lot of complexity for our kids is there are more ways for you to create a living without working for someone else than any time in history, right? So let's just I'll give you sort of the self-awareness, a chapter of my self-awareness journey.
Yeah.
When I went out on my own 12 years ago, after being on teams and organizations my whole life, and if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm a pretty high extrovert, right? And Myers-Briggs would call me an ENFP, so high sensory, high external motivated, right? Yeah, I'm not surprised. And so now I'm sitting in front of my computer at home, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I like not having the boss that I don't, want to work for. I'm looking at the boss in the mirror. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But nothing's trained me to go do business development. Nothing's trained me to go out, knock on doors. Thankfully, a lot of my network started to find me and say, hey, can you help us here? Can you help us there? And I built a portfolio over time. But I missed the seasons of working with people. Like, if you're just going in and out, I mean, that's okay, but and it can be inspiring. But the real joy is being a part of a group, building something over time.
Yeah.
And so that's when I said, okay, I want to join a few boards. I want to, as an advisor, as a volunteer, and then as a full paid board member. And that started scratching an itch, if you will, right? But there's so many ways that you can do that. But I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that I was really going to miss being
team.
Part of a community, and that's something that, at that point in my life, like being an active parent with 3 boys who were, in their early teen years, like that was a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I loved it, but it wasn't scratching my solving really intellectual problems itch that I had. Right.
Yeah. And what I like about that story too, Steve, is it's interesting for us as individuals, also for us as employers with teams, as we're thinking about those dynamics and helping people find their magic chemistry, whatever that is, of teams. But I like that you were able to solve for missing teams by jumping on multiple teams, because a lot of people are like, you can only be on one real team at a time.
Correct.
And it's not true. I actually think, and I'd love your opinion on this, I actually think we've just started this shift to the gig economy and people being able to have side hustles and things. But at some point in time, I hope for and I believe that people will be on multiple teams. And in fact, those teams may be dropping in to do different work in different organizations. So we might move from like gig workers to gig teams. And that's fascinating, going back to your early point on like journeying and having talent moving through and bringing diverse perspective and experience.
And this gets to the heart of what I'm researching right now for my second book, which is a really interesting dynamic. And that is being revealed by a lot of the cognitive scientists are saying working on a diversity of projects in a diversity of environments unlocks greater creativity and innovation.
Interesting.
Okay? And that's not how we've designed work traditionally. You stay on this team, you need to be here a few years. And if you think about it, it does make sense that in a world that's changing quickly, changing environments on your own more frequently than in the past is going to give you a greater capacity to say, oh, when I was over here, this is how we solved that problem. In that company, we solved this. I can't tell you how many times at LinkedIn, we would have something come up that was really complex and challenging to the business. And the CEO would go around the table and say, has anyone been in this situation before when you work somewhere else?
Yeah.
Because we haven't as a company, but all of you are from somewhere else. And the more we had people from different, countries, industries, experiences, the more our capacity to problem solve was strengthened, right?
Yeah.
And that's why part of my journey of trying to give confidence to leaders that a more fluid world of work isn't necessarily a bad thing is sort of saying, let's just explain problem solving and adaptability, agility, whatever you want, fancy word you want to use.
Yeah.
That's this mega power today, because your business is going to need to change. And as leaders, what's super hard for us right now is, and we're seeing this play out particularly in big technology right now, is the need for new skills is accelerating. I need to, so we used to have, okay, we're going to get rid of a bunch of people, cut costs, we're not going to recruit for a while. Now it's like we're going to get rid of a bunch of people and we're going to hire a bunch of new people who know these new skills, whatever that is, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, whatever that is. And that's not something we're used to doing, and so many, like, this is the big mantra I use with my clients. Like, hey, when you face something new, usually in business, we're taught, go benchmark a bunch of people who've done this before.
Yeah.
Right. What business community has been through a pandemic prior to ours, right? Like, who's been through the changing psychology of the workforce? Who's been through a whole generation that sees things thanks to the internet that they could never see before? Like, we're going to have to be the benchmark. We're going to have to make the sausage. And and this is a big, big point, if you do not have an experimentation culture in your organization today, you are at a huge disadvantage, because this is all about trying stuff, right? That's why I love doing HR work in technology companies, because most of the population are software engineers. And what does a software engineer do? A/B test. Let's try this. And what works, then we'll build a new experiment and we'll do A/B testing. And if you bring that mindset to organizational thinking, I think it gives you lots of possibilities. But this whole command and control universe, and that's why you see, banking, insurance, retail really struggle,
just hemorrhaging,
because they were, and again, to be fair, in their defense, a lot of those are highly regulated, right? We can't just screw around, or let's take healthcare. Like, we can't go do a bunch of experiments here. People could die. But there are ways to experiment on smaller scales that are going to, net you hopefully some learnings. And what alternative do you have? If you don't experiment, someone else is going to figure it out, right? And you're going to lose.
And to that point, I guess that's a great way to answer that earlier question I was touching on. As a leader, how do you create that opportunity for your team members, individuals, to find that chemistry? I think creating an opportunity for experimentation in every role of the org is important, because you see a lot of companies that build their innovation center. It's like, oh, they're the people that do the experiments, but you do your day job and, don't fall out of line. And that's driving huge loss of job satisfaction, energy, growth potential. So I think that I'm intrigued by your work on diverse, you said diverse projects and diverse environments. I'm intrigued by like how that starts to translate in small and large teams doing these little, stretch projects or otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we've always known that rotating teams, people on teams is a good thing. I mean,
Yeah.
General Electric, this is Jack Welch, like they were known for, oh, you've been in this organization doing well for 2 years, well, you're going to go over there to aviation or
Yeah.
electrical products or whatever. That's a really good thing. But I think, what I see if we play out the future right now, and you and I had a great conversation pre-show around the future work really is the future of learning.
Yes.
If you do believe that the need for new skills is going to accelerate, if you do believe that the unpredictability and uncertainty of the future is going to continue to be a challenge to us,
Yeah.
we need to equip ourselves with teams that can change and grow and more faster than ever before, right?
Yeah.
Then that does sort of lead into, I need to build a talent strategy that's constantly upgrading my talent.
Yeah.
So I believe, and one of the big barriers I worry about for particularly big organizations is they think they can recruit themselves out of their way out of this problem. You can't.
No.
If more people are changing careers, this is a fact, more people are changing careers than any time in history, and more jobs need newer skills than ever before. The inventory that we're used to having of qualified people is just not there.
I
It's
agree.
going to continue to shrink. So I, as a business, have to become a business school. Every business is going to have to become a business school. And the problem with that is the financial modeling, the investor, paradigms are not built for you to do anything other than deliver value. Like my business model is, Dane, you're in the job and 90% of the time you're creating value and 10%, vacation and, learning.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be 50-50. 50% of the time you're doing and 50% of the time at least that. And 50% of the time we're going to give you a new project, a new assignment, a new virtual team that you're going to be on. We're going to give you some virtual learning. We're going to, classes and things like that. But you're not valuable to us unless you're growing.
Yeah.
And so and the beauty of that contract, I think, is like, Dane, I'm going to make you better for the future, whether you stay here or whether you leave, because I care about you and your future. I don't, and this is traditionally, I would say, I only care about you if you stay, right? That's the model of the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know you're going to leave, and you know you're going to leave. And if you leave better, you're going to bring all your referrals and all your friends and all your kids, you're going to send them my way. Like, and maybe we're going to do a deal in the future, or maybe you're going to come back.
I've always wondered about that. I've always wondered.
So important, right?
It's so important. And I've always wondered, like, employer brand was a big thing early in the 2000s, and it comes and goes. But I've always wondered, why aren't we badging people in today's world to say, hey, you worked at this company and you achieved this growth there. So we're going to create some connectivity that says people who work at these companies are likely to have gone through this type of growth curve. So they're likely to fit in well in this type of role or this type of company in the future. Like, why can't we move away from resumes and actually pay a little more homage to, like you said, LinkedIn from 400 to 4,000 employees? That's very different from LinkedIn today. It's very different from, Salesforce today. And so the people have certain skills and certain journeys in life that are very meaningful. And I think we should be using more of that data to construct teams in the future.
Yeah, and I think that it's with that kind of information that those insights are really in our grasp. And anyone who's building an AI product, if you're listening now or know someone or you're investing, this is the holy grail that I think we need to solve, which is predicting a person's profile and predicting how likely they are or how confident we are that they could learn something new. So, for example, I'll give you a story. This is, maybe 15 years ago at LinkedIn. We knew that we needed to hire a bunch of Python developers. And Python, and I'm not a technologist, so I'm going to butcher this So forgive me, those of you who know that I don't know what I'm talking about. But Python is generally cloud computing language. Okay, so
Yeah.
programming for the cloud, and it's not overly complex, but it does take about a 6-month boot camp to sort of figure out the basics. When we realized we needed a bunch of Python, because we're LinkedIn, we went on LinkedIn and said there's not enough people, so we're going to have to create some Python engineers. Someone on the team said something which was brilliant. They said, let's look at everyone who knows Python now and look at what they knew before they knew Python.
Oh, so
Where
you
did they
path
work?
dependency.
That's right. Where did they work? What education did they have? What projects did they work
Yeah.
on? And let's see if we can come up with a predictive indicator of higher confidence that someone likely can learn and be really good at Python. And
Yeah.
we found, using that model, we came up with a dozen people that were high targets. And we went to all of them and said, hey, would you like to leave your job, go into this boot camp for 6 months, and completely pivot your career into this Python, which looks to be the future of cloud computing? And they're like, yeah. So what I think we can use AI for is sort of say, any team should be doing this now. And we've done this traditionally with salespeople. We're like, who are our superstars?
Yeah.
Where did they come from? What companies trained them? What languages do they know? What universities did they go to? Can we see a pedigree that we can go apply and find other people that are going to give us a higher confidence that these people will probably be stars too, right?
Yeah.
And maybe someone who worked at 3M or IBM, that something about that culture just fits with our culture. Like that, we don't have to go through all kinds of training. Like they just get it. Like we should be able to figure that out like today if we just program the AI the right way.
And it's important that we use AI because traditionally, like I always like to hire people that work for enterprise because they got good early career experience. It's really tough managing someone who's landing late at night and their car's not available and they don't know where to go, right? So I always loved going back to your point about how people compete and deal with challenge. That was a profile I like to hire, but that was very analog. Like, I don't know. There are so many companies out there and there are so many functions in companies. I don't know what Steve did at LinkedIn or what Jenny did at Salesforce or whatever.
Yeah.
So it would be cool if the technologist could come up with a way of tracking and mapping that. That would be very cool. That would be super
I have
cool.
a trainer who is just, he's got a gift, and he's funny. He does karaoke when we work out, and we work out in groups. And I met him during the pandemic over Zoom. So he just on my phone, and I'm in my garage doing most people in California, we turned our garage into a workout center. So one day I was just like, Mike, how did you figure this out? He goes, waiting tables. I go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
He goes, I used to be a waiter. I said, because you got 8 or 9 people in the gym and we all have different needs and we all get motivated differently. And, because I'm a, HR guy, I'm always thinking about how is he doing this? And he goes, I learned waiting tables that everyone wants their food served differently and they all have different needs. And that was the greatest training for this job. And I would bet you most people who are, waiting tables are like, they're doing that to get somewhere else, right? They may not be appreciating enormous lessons they're being served that will carry them their whole lives.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually got my first job as a recruiter when I was waiting tables.
Wow.
So I did a good job looking after him every Friday night when he brought customers in and he offered me a summer job. So there you go. It's
Are you serious?
Yeah,
I love that story.
Dead set.
Yeah.
And it's very cool.
It's not what you think, right? If people would think, oh, you went through a search firm or some agency to find a job.
No.
It was waiting tables. Wow.
It's interesting because as you think about the future of learning and this concept, I think your percentages are bold, but I'm really excited by them. Like 50% time of like learning and exploring, experimenting is awesome. I can imagine my CFO right now is going, no, Dane, don't even think about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it makes me think that if you get the right combination and you consider that employees and team members are going to travel, that maybe the training and the learning actually is more on the job. So the 50% of learning and development for one person might be in a job like waiting tables, or doing something else in the business that is still productive, but it's productive learning rather than traditional like classroom-based learning or college-based learning. And I think that's captivating. Even as a parent thinking about my kids, I'm like, if they could go to a school where they were actually doing real work and not just classroom-based learning, even if it was a mix, that would be very powerful.
Yeah, I think, I don't know whether it was at Cisco or some other employer, but we were trained in sort of 70-30-10, which is 70% of your learning is experiential.
Yeah.
20% is like instructional, right?
Yeah.
And then I forget the other 10%, but I really believe that. Like, and as an athlete, I learned about myself. Like, don't tell me how to do this. Just show me.
Yeah.
Show me the shot. Show me the tennis swing. Show me. I want to watch you do it.
Yeah.
And then my muscles, the way my brain works is that I will take that on and I will start doing whatever I see you do. But don't like hold your feet like this, hold the racket like this, grip it like that. No. That doesn't work for me. I start like tuning you out. And some people do need the exact technical specifications, right?
Yeah.
So and that's a whole nother, you get into the science of learning and how we do that. And that's the beauty of where we're at right now. We are at the diversity of opportunities for you to learn are just extreme, like infinite right now. Like, whatever you want. Like I morphed from reading a physical book to listening to books.
Yes, me too.
During the pandemic. And I also happen to be the generation where, like, when I graduated college, I never touched a computer, right? And I was a hunt and peck, had to type all my papers.
Yeah.
And then the next year, I'm having to buy software to teach myself how to type. And I was like, and when I grew up, like, if you type, you're going to be a secretary. Like, why would you type? The secretaries do that. Now everyone does it. And our kids pretty soon will just do voice to text. Like, they're not going to need to type pretty soon, right?
I know. It's so cool. There's a final point. There's so much we've covered today. We should definitely do more shows. But there's a final point around, like, this belief in human energy and creating more from the people that you have. And that's what I'm hearing a lot from your messaging here, Steve. Yes, people can travel through organizations, but great organizations can be business schools. And I've got a book here behind me, Wrong Fit, Right Fit by Andre Martin. And he talks a lot about, in the future, the fit is not culture fit. It's a fit for the way that we work. Like, I like to work remotely and outdoors and traveling, and someone else likes to work in a dark room with lots of information available to them. Like, how can we get more prescriptive around the way people like to work and the way that we're going to develop skills in those businesses? It's interesting as the future of learning unfolds. I don't know if you have a view on, how that may reshape, organizations.
Well, I also think, that is a worthy aspiration to discover what environments inspire people to do the best work. But I'll also say this. I've been forced to work in some environments where I thought, I'm not going to want to work here.
Yeah.
And it unlocked something in me that I didn't think was there. Like,
Yeah.
I do great in noisy environments. Like, I just do. Like, I was like, no, it's too loud for me. Turns out I get really inspired. Like, one of the coolest trends that in the last 10 years was this whole, the WeWork phenomenon. So I was in Mexico City when WeWork was just taking off, and I ran into two clients that had completely opposite stories that were just fascinating. One company was doing so well that we can afford to build a much better office. So while it's being built, we're going to put you all in WeWork for 6 to 9 months. We're going to retool this office. It's going to be awesome. And then we're going to go back to that. So you can kind of see where the story is probably going to go. So then the whole team goes into WeWork. We're talking like 30 people. Okay, they're sitting in a WeWork in Mexico City. Then the CEO's like, okay, it's done. Let's go do a tour back of the new office. I want to show it to you. It's going to be amazing. They all do the tour, and all of a sudden, the CEO looks around. And it's like all the faces are really dour and depressed. And he's like, "What's wrong?" He goes, "We don't want to go to one office. Like, we are getting so much energy working around other people.
Yeah,
it's so interesting, and it's inspiring, and we're sharing ideas, and we're learning new things. We don't want to go to a self-contained, environment."
Yeah.
And then another CEO had the exact same experience, but the complete opposite. Like, hurry up and finish the office. This place is nuts.
They hated it.
But really, and it really is impossible to come up with a work environment that everyone on your team says this is perfect for me. It really is, because we all are different. Work is great, but it involves people, and that makes it very complex. But it is worth experimenting, right? And trying these things and putting people in new environments. So another great story I have on this one is we had an executive at one point who was really struggling with their scores in the employee survey around, my boss inspires me to do the best work. And they kept getting lower scores than they wanted. And so I asked the boss, I said, so where do you meet with your team that's giving you this lower score? Like, where do you meet with them? Oh, in my office. Okay. And when you meet with them, what's usually the nature of the discussion? Something's going great or something's broken? Oh, well, I'm here to fix all the problems. So it's just something's broken.
Oh, it's the framing.
So I said, so what do you think your team members feel when they go into this office? What do you think is going to happen? And so they immediately pivoted to walking around the campus outside, not meeting in his office.
Powerful.
Ever again. And then you take away two people looking at each other to two people looking forward, and you think about the decompression of stress that comes from, I think about the greatest conversations I have with my kids are never when I say, can we sit down and have a talk?
No.
Never.
No.
But when we're driving, there's no agenda. We're both looking forward, and they'll say, I'm not sure I'm going to make the basketball team, Dad. I'm really worried about it. Or I feel like this other kid's bullying me. Or I think I blew that test.
The vulnerability comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Something that the guard is down. The, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like the informal moment presents just something. And that's another failure, I think, of work environments. And that's why I'm not for everyone in the office or everyone home or hybrid. I'm for whatever works for your organization. And it could be so many different iterations, but one size fits all doesn't feel right to me anymore,
No. Yeah, my perfect job would be part-time skiing, part-time sailing, part-time surfing, and then fitting the work in around all three of those things.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what work I can do on a surfboard.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
This has been awesome, Steve. I mean, everything from like early life change and curiosity, coaching and sport. I loved your concept on building, going right down to the studs and building and seeing how that tests your craft. I thought that the whole point around AI solving the difficult problem of talent awareness, hopefully there are some great entrepreneurs out there listening in for that prompt. And I loved where we moved into sort of the human energy that people get from their work, from diversity of projects, diversity of experience, diversity of environments, like so much good stuff. I'm excited to continue collaborating and supporting, particularly with your second book coming out. If people want to find you, your work, your research, your keynote speeches, where do they connect?
Easy place to find me on LinkedIn, obviously. Just look up Steve Cadigan. My website, stevecadigan.com. Or I also have a humorous stream of stories on TikTok.
Awesome.
Called True Stories from Corporate America, but it just look me up under my name. Or you could just reach out to me at steve@cadiganventures.com. You can email me directly.
Brilliant. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Steve. The energy's infectious, and I'm pumped.
Thanks, man. It's been really fun, and we do have to find a way to work together more. This is really great.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.